Hi everyone, I'm Ben Mims, cooking columnist for the LA Times, and today I'm going to show you how to make stone fruit jam. You know, jam can seem very intimidating for a lot of people, but I really want to show you how easy it can be and how wonderful it can be to use all the great fruit that we get here in Southern California. This is going to be the first in a 4-part series about preserving all this wonderful fruit that we get here. And since it's summertime, it's July right now, that means stone fruit is at its peak. So I'm going to break down all the different types of fruit that we get here, and I'm going to show you how to make it all into a great jam. So when you go to farmers markets or even grocery stores, which have a great selection of stone fruit nowadays, you're typically going to encounter about 5 main types of stone fruit. You have your peaches, nectarines, apricots, plums, and then you have your hybrids like this Pluot, which is a mixture of plum and apricot. There are dozens and dozens of different varieties and styles among all 5 of these. If you don't know what you like, buy a few different types, try them when you get home. So the great thing about stone fruit jam is that, whether you pick one variety or 5 or 6 and mix them all together, it's gonna taste great. They all complement each other. Some are sweeter, some are more tart, some are more floral. So it all works together. So don't worry about getting the right style. Once you make jam a few times, you'll be able to hone in on the different types that you like and make your own jam the way you want it. So today I got some really great peaches and I'm gonna make a peach jam. I've got 3 amazing different varieties of peaches. I have these yellow peaches, which I'm chopping now, some white peaches, and then some donut peaches, which are really floral and always, to me, have one of the best flavors of the peaches that you can find. So as I cut them, it depends on the ripeness, how big you want to cut your fruit. But typically for a fruit the size of, a softball or a baseball like this peach, I had to cut it into about 8 wedges and then kind of roughly chop it into, 1/2-inch chunks. The more ripe the fruit is, the bigger you can cut it because it will break down as it cooks. But you do want to use pretty ripe fruit. When you go to farmers markets, talk to the farmer or the seller, tell them you're making jam, and then ask for what's called seconds. Now, seconds are fruit that is perfectly good, perfectly ripe. It might have, a ding or a scratch or a little bruise on it, but it tastes great. And they're usually sold much cheaper than the kind of really beautiful fruit they save for grocery stores. So as you're breaking down your fruit, you can definitely take the skin off the fruit if you want to. I like to leave it on. There's a lot of flavor in the skin, peaches, plums, everything. It makes your job a lot easier. You don't have to peel the fruit. And it also lends a really nice color to the finished jam. And I'll show you that when we get to the end. Also, as you're breaking down your fruit, you'll notice, especially if you have peaches, that the pit is really easy to get out. You just kind of, especially when it's ripe, pull your thumb out and take it out. But there are other pits, especially in plums, that are called clingstone plums or clingstone fruit. And that literally means that the stone or the pit inside clings to the flesh pretty heartily. So just cut around the stone to free the fruit and continue chopping it like this as well. So now that I have all my fruit mixed here in a bowl, what I'm going to do is take the weight of it, divide it by 3, and that's how much sugar I'm going to use. So this recipe, it's not really a recipe, it's more of a method of kind of dividing the amount of ingredients I use by 3 to add the next one. I think is really better because 1, you can memorize it and you know always what proportions you need to use. It's also more efficient than using volume measuring cups because if you use volume measuring cups, it can really affect the recipe depending on how large or small you chop the fruit, and then that affects everything else. So this is a much easier way because you get to combine all the ingredients in one bowl. It really keeps everything clean and efficient. And so then once you add the sugar, you want to add your lemon juice. And so the lemon juice is also going to be 1/3 the weight of the sugar. And lemon juice is here because it helps balance all the sugar that you're using. It also helps keep the fruit really bright as well. So then once you have these 3 main components, you don't really need anything else. But like with all desserts or sweet things, I like to add a pinch of salt just to kind of bring the flavors out. It's not that much, and it kind of, keeps again from things being too sweet. And also, I would say the first few times you make jam, you want to keep it pretty basic and plain because, you know, the different types of stone fruit you get, whether they're peaches, plums, or the hybrids, they really have great flavor and aroma and character all their own. So you want to taste those more than anything else. But then once you start experimenting more and kind of building other layers of flavor, it's great to add things like bay leaves, cinnamon sticks, cardamom pods, like dried spices like that, whole spices, or my favorite thing, a good old vanilla bean. I like to keep the vanilla bean whole so that it kind of perfumes the flavor of vanilla throughout the fruit, but you don't have all the seeds, and so it's not just like overpowering. So I'm gonna add that into this one. And then once all the fruit and all the ingredients are in the bowl, all you have left to do is just mix it up. And what this does is the sugar will kind of draw out a lot of the juices from the fruit. This is called macerating. And so you'll see that as you stir it together, it looks kind of like fruit mixed with some wet sugar, but then you're gonna let this sit at least 15 minutes at room temperature. An hour is even better. And what I like to do is actually let this mix together and then stick it in the fridge for either overnight. You can do a day, 2 days, 3 days. The longer it sits, the more liquid comes out of it, the sugar dissolves. So this jam is ready for you whenever you're ready to make it. Okay, so now that your fruit has sat, it's macerated, and all that liquid is pulled out, you're gonna cook it in. It's time to get set up to cook the jam. The great thing about making jam at home, although it seems very intimidating and like you need a lot of things, you really only need 3 things. You need a nice heavy pot to cook it in. I really like enamel cast iron pots to cook in, just like this regular old Dutch oven that you would make soup or tomato sauce or anything in. You want a long-handled either wooden spoon or like a heat-proof silicone or rubber spatula. That will help you stir and also keep your hand away from kind of like the bubbling sugar and fruit below. And then you want a bowl filled with some cold water and a big spoon. And this is gonna help you to kind of skim the foam that rises to the top of the jam when you start cooking. So now you have all your equipment ready to go. So now we're gonna pour all the fruit into the pot. And then once you have all the fruit in the pot, now we're gonna set this over high heat and bring it to a boil. So when the fruit starts to boil, you'll start to see a little like foam or scum kind of rise to the surface. These are just impurities in the fruit that are kind of coming out. Nothing that's inedible. You could actually leave them and keep stirring the pot and not take it out if you wanted to. But I like to use my spoon here and kind of just like skim the foam off of the surface of the fruit. That just makes the final jam clearer. It doesn't really affect the taste at all. But what you'll do is you'll take your spoon, you'll skim the foam off the top with it, and then rinse it in the bowl of water after each use, and go back and skim some more until you get all the foam off and the jam is nice and clear and bubbling. So now that I've taken all the kind of foam and scum off the top of the jam, I'm gonna keep boiling it over high heat. You wanna cook jam over really high heat and keep it at a rapid boil because you wanna make sure that the sugars don't caramelize from cooking too long, and you also wanna keep the brightness and freshness of the fruit intact as much as possible, so you wanna cook it quickly. And so as you stir, you'll see the texture of the fruit go from these kind of nice bright chunks that will kind of break down and kind of form the body of the jam. So what I'm gonna show you now, while we're starting to boil at the beginning phase, I'm just gonna show you what some of the fruit looks like on a plate. And then when the jam is done, I'll show you what it looks like again, and you'll see the kind of color difference, how it gets darker, the fruit breaks down, and how it looks like jam and not just fruit and sugar at the end. So the most important thing you want to remember while you're making jam is to keep stirring it once it starts boiling, because this stuff will stick to the bottom of the pot. So you want to make sure to, every couple minutes, move your spoon around the bottom of the pot just to make sure nothing is sticking. Make sure that fruit and sugar is cooking evenly, and that way you won't burn anything on the bottom, and the jam will be nice and evenly cooked. So you'll know the jam is almost done when you look at the surface of it, and when you stir, there's not a separation between the kind of liquid and the fruit. is all there together. It's kind of gelled together, makes like one consistent texture. And whenever you stir the jam, the spoon dragging across the bottom kind of pulls the jam away from it, and you feel like the jam is starting to stick. And so when you take this off the heat and cool it down, it'll be kind of soft set, but you'll have everything you need right there. So now that my jam is done cooking and I've taken it off the heat, I like to let it sit for like a minute or two just to stop bubbling and not be so scorching hot. I want to show you now what the texture looks like compared to the fruit when we first started out. So I'm gonna get a little bit here, put it on this plate. As you'll see, it doesn't run as much around the edge and it's a little darker, and that's because some of the sugar has caramelized, but also the kind of color from the skins has leached into the sugar as well. So that makes a really beautiful different color to the jam. And as this cools completely, it will set up into a firm jam. So if you want to put this in like a Tupperware or any kind of plastic storage container, you want to let the jam cool completely in the pot, then transfer it to that container and then store it in the fridge. If you want to put it into jars like I do, you want to do that while the jam is still pretty hot. So as soon as it comes off the heat, let it rest for a couple minutes, clean your jars, then you're ready to go. I like to use this jar funnel because it kind of rests in the top of a half-pint jar, keeps the whole process clean, it keeps jam from getting on the edges of the jar, makes your life much easier. So then I just want to take spoonfuls of the jam and just pour them into the jar. So once I've added all my fruit just to the top, then I can remove this funnel, and it kind of puts the fruit right at the edge of the jar, which is what you want. So I'll take my lid, pop that on the jam, I'll pop that on the jar, take the band, and just screw it till it's tight, and there you have a perfect jar jam. Now, if you want to learn how to can this properly and make it shelf stable, you definitely can. We put a link in the description below to the USDA.gov website and their guidelines for home canning. But I prefer just to let this cool to room temperature and then stick it in the fridge. It will last there for months, but that won't be a problem because you'll definitely get around to eating all of it before then. So if you like this video, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell to get notified when we do the next 3 jam videos, and hit that like button, and go to latimes.com/food for more recipes.